Welcome to Living Chassidus. Together, let's live the Chassidus we learn.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, so first of all, l'chaim is water. L'chaim. So as it was mentioned, and let me begin with that. The first thing that ever happened in history was mentioned quickly, so I just want to make it clear. First thing that ever happened quickly, first thing that happened in history on today's date, Gimmel Tammuz, is that there was a war in Givon. And Yisroel was fighting 5 kings and mighty kings. And he was worried that he won't be able to finish the war before nightfall. And he turns to the sun and he says, Daim, he says, be quiet or stop. Be quiet from singing Shira, which would automatically cause the sun to stop. Stop in mid-sky. And in that way, Yisroel was able to finish the war. Now, what's very fascinating is that the Medrash tells us that when we talk about a tzaddik passing on and a new tzaddik taking his place, we say, Uba Hashemesh v'zarach Hashemesh, which means the sun sets and the sun rises, meaning to say, as soon as, or maybe even before, one tzaddik finishes his mission, the new tzaddik already starts. So the sun sets, the sun rises, which means we're comparing a tzaddik to the sun. And what's unbelievable is that Gimmel Tammuz, the sun doesn't set. The sun doesn't set. The sun is still shining. The light is still here. The energy is still here. The Rebbe is still with us. Another interesting point is that war happened on Friday. That war that Yeshua stops the sun was on a Friday, right before Shabbos. This I'm already adding. I didn't see this anywhere, but we know from the Rebbe Sichos, from before the Rebbe Sichos, from a famous Ramban, that we're holding right now on Erev Shabbos. And in order to finish the war with evil, and to bring Mashiach, we need the sun not to set. The sun can't set. The sun needs to remain in the sky. And it actually says in Yeshua, it says there was never such a day, and there will never be such a day like that day, which happened to be Shlishi B'Tammuz, Gimmel Tammuz. This is just fascinating. I want to take it a little further, this idea. In Tanya, Perek Lamed Hey, the Alter Rebbe at the end says that you have this idea throughout Tanya, it's speaking about Gilui Elokos, or the Shechina resting in a certain place. And the Alter Rebbe asks, he says, how come there's so many levels of Gilui Elokos? There's Gilui Elokos in the person doing the mitzvah as a whole, and there's more Gilui Elokos in the limb with which you do the mitzvah. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean there's so many different types of Gilui Elokos? Isn't godliness oneness? And then you say every 10 people that get together, for example, over here, Kain Hara, the Shechina's here. And then at another Farbrengen, the Shechina's there. So what's going on? How many Shechinas are there? And the Alter Rebbe brings a Gemara where a heretic asked, I believe it was Rabbi Gamliel, he asks him, how many Shechinas do you have? Don't you people believe in one God? But then you say that wherever there are 10 Jews, the Shechina's there. So Rabbi Gamliel answers him, he says, a mashal of the sun. He says the sun shines indiscriminately. The sun is available. How many windows do you want to open up to the sun? Or just close the window, close the shades, and the sun doesn't shine in at all. So I want to connect these two ideas. The Rebbe, as the Gemara and the Medrash say, is like the sun, shining. The Rebbe is shining. And again, Gimmel Tammuz tells us the Rebbe continues to shine. The Rebbe is available. However, you have the choice. You have the choice to open a window and you have a choice to open many windows. You have a choice to bring in that sunlight with a filter. You have a choice to bring it in without a filter. It's up to us how much Rebbe you want to bring into your life. How many windows do you want to open for the Rebbe to be able to shine? Do you want the Rebbe to shine into your machshava? Should the Rebbe shine in your dibur? Should the Rebbe shine in your maisa? These are all windows that allow the Rebbe to shine in your life. There's a nice story with a chassid that I'm guessing everybody heard of. His name is Reb Zalman Jaffe. Everybody heard of him? People smile when they hear his name. So Reb Zalman Jaffe had a very nice relationship with the Rebbe, sort of a friendly relationship with the Rebbe. He was able to say certain things to the Rebbe that the average person was not. And he once brought in a group to the Rebbe from England, a group of Chassidim. He arranged a trip, and they traveled to the Rebbe. And they obviously had the most amazing experience by the Rebbe, and they wanted to thank him. So they bought him a set of Gemara, a set of Shas. It was also, I think, because, I remember the way I heard the story, it was also because he was teaching them Gemara. He had a Gemara Shiur, so they decided they're going to bring him a beautiful set of Gemara as a gift. And in the Gemara that he was learning with them at the time, they wrote a letter. I actually tried printing today, it didn't work for me, but I wanted to show it over here. They wrote him a letter. They printed it in the Gemara, and in the letter they write, "Thank you, Rabbi Zalman Jaffe, for arranging this trip from England to the Lubavitcher Rebbe in New York, and this is why we're giving you this gift." And they all signed their names. So Rabbi Zalman Jaffe walks into Yechidus with his Gemara. I'm guessing he's the first and last one that ever did that. He came into the Rebbe, he didn't come in with the Gemara. That was just not the place. You weren't planning on sitting and learning with the Rebbe Gemara. But he walks in with a big Gemara, puts it down on the Rebbe's table. I don't remember hearing this, but my guess is that the Rebbe smiled, just knowing Zalman Jaffe. And Rebbe Zalman Jaffe opens up the Gemara, and he shows the Rebbe the letter. And he says to the Rebbe, "Can the Rebbe sign?" So the Rebbe says, "No. I didn't travel from England to the Lubavitcher Rebbe." So Zalman Jaffe doesn't blink an eye, and he says, "I was told that when a chassid travels, the Rebbe travels with him. So then you did travel with me." So the Rebbe took out a pen, and the Rebbe signed. And the Rebbe signed on the top, actually. So someone was once speaking about this, and he asked, "1 second, what's going on over here? What's going on over here? Does the Rebbe travel with you, or does the Rebbe not?" The Rebbe doesn't just sign things because it makes people feel good if it's not true. So was it true or was it not true? If it's not true, we understand why the Rebbe didn't sign, but then the Rebbe does sign. So which one is it? One or the other? The Rebbe didn't think of it? Why didn't the Rebbe sign it? So a possible answer is, we don't know, the Rebbe didn't tell us, but a possible answer is, of course the Rebbe does travel with you. The Rebbe is with you. But until you recognize that, until you realize that, in a certain way, the Rebbe is not there. The sun is shining. The Rebbe is here. The Rebbe is always available in his full energy and light. It's up to you. Do you want to allow that light in? As soon as you say, "My window's open," the Rebbe is there, the Rebbe signs it. Not only the Rebbe signs it, the Rebbe signs it on the top. The Rebbe is there. So, when you think about allowing the Rebbe into your life, when you think about the Rebbe, and this is very important, when you hear Rebbe, what feeling comes to your heart? What do you feel? Do you feel uplifted? Do you feel joy? When you think about the Rebbe, do you feel seriousness? Do you feel emunah, bitachon, geula? What feeling comes to you when you imagine the Rebbe? As soon as you hear the Rebbe, what happens? Do you smile? Do you get serious? What happens to you? That's a good question to ask yourself. What does the Rebbe mean to you? I'll share over here, although it needs to be understood what I'm about to say. Someone once called me up, and he says to me, "I want to share with you something. But please don't, look down at me when I say what I'm about to say." And I thought I heard I thought I heard it all. You know, hopefully you don't judge people. People can be going through anything. But this person did tell me something original. What did he tell me that was original? He tells me that when he thinks about the Rebbe, he feels like he wants to, and you have to listen to the end. Chas v'shalom to walk out with just what he said he felt. He said he feels like he wants to rip up a picture of the Rebbe. And he says, don't misunderstand me. I'm not Chas v'shalom. I have nothing against the Rebbe. Chas v'shalom. I love the Rebbe. But as soon as I think about the Rebbe, all I feel is pressure. Too much pressure. So I had to speak to him on the phone and explain to him that clearly you're misreading, you're misinterpreting the Rebbe. You have a wrong version of the Rebbe. I don't know how you got that. You have a wrong version of the Rebbe. If that's the feeling that you get from the Rebbe, something's wrong with how you understand the Rebbe. So that's a good question to ask yourself. When you think about the Rebbe, what feeling comes to your heart automatically? Just a quick little story. Someone once came to a certain town, a big fiery chassid of a certain Rebbe, and people were talking very badly about his Rebbe. They're saying very negative things about the Rebbe. And he wasn't protesting. He wasn't saying anything. Now, generally, if someone does say something about the Rebbe, you have to stand up and protest. It's your obligation, even if that's not generally what you feel like doing, but you have to stand up for what's wrong. It's your Rebbe. Stand up for his kavod. You can't be moichel on the Rebbe's kavod. You have to do it in a b'darkei naim or b'darkei shalom, but b'toikef, as the Rebbe always says. You have to stand up for what's wrong. So, but he doesn't do that. And someone speaking about his Rebbe really negatively doesn't say anything. So someone asks him after, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you say anything? You respect your Rebbe? So he says, I'll tell you. There was a guy that once came to a certain town. That's a story. There was a guy that came to a certain town, and people started to scream at him. And I'm not getting into this topic, but this is just the story. People started to scream at him that he should give a get to his wife. And people started to curse at him and scream at him and throw things at him. In the meantime, this guy's not budging. At a certain point, someone asks him, are you going to do it? He says, I have no idea what you're talking about. You got the wrong guy. You're talking to the wrong person. There's someone else in my city, but you got the wrong person. So this chassid says, they're saying negative things about my Rebbe. That's not my Rebbe. They're talking about someone else. So why would I stand up against them? They're speaking about someone else that I don't know that person. So that's why I'm not standing up against them. In other words, you really have to understand who this Rebbe is. How do you interpret the Rebbe? And everything I said before, if the feeling is energy and koyach and positivity and simcha, emunah, bitachon, geula, whatever, any of those feelings are all true. Upliftedness. But what is the Rebbe? Now there's a beautiful vart. Every day in davening we say, Zeh keli va'anvehu, elekei avi v'arei memenu. This is my Hashem, and I will beautify him. This is the God of my fathers, and I will exalt him. So the Shalach Kodesh writes, Zeh keli, if it's my personal Hashem, Zeh keli, if it's my God, ve'anvehu. He says ve'anvehu is a makeup of two words. Ani, vahu, me and him, but those two words become one word. Zeh keli, if it's my personal Hashem, ve'anvehu. So then me and him are united. Elekei avi, but if he's only my Hashem because he's the Hashem of my father, I was told about him, then v'arei memenu, then he remains exalted, he remains distant from me. And I want to apply that to the Rebbe. There's my Rebbe, and then there's the Rebbe. My Rebbe and the Rebbe. There's what does the Rebbe mean to you personally, and then there's what is the Rebbe. And they're both important. It's actually more important, or I shouldn't say more important, but it's important to first have my personal Rebbe, and then know, but what is the Rebbe? So if the Rebbe means to you, the Rebbe's blue eyes, if that's what the Rebbe means to you, beautiful. If that's what gets you inspired, if that Rebbe is meaningful to you, great. But we need to remember that that isn't the Rebbe, that's your personalized Rebbe. And that's beautiful. But never to forget that there is also the Rebbe. And we have to know, what is the definition of that? What is the definition of the Rebbe? How do we know? We have to ask the Rebbe to define what a Rebbe is. So what's fascinating is that, again, the date Gimmel Tammuz is a date on a letter that the Rebbe wrote in Tafshin Yud. Okay, so this is right after the Frierdiker Rebbe is nostalgic. The Rebbe writes a letter dated Gimmel Tammuz. And it's a very important letter. And it's just fascinating that this is Gimmel Tammuz before the Rebbe even becomes Rebbe, at least officially. And what does it say in that letter? It says in the letter, Rabbim HaMachapsim. There are many people that are searching and trying to categorize, to define what the Rebbe is. What is the Rebbe? And the Rebbe goes through a few descriptions. He says, is the Rebbe a Bal Ruach HaKodesh? Is that what you think about? A Bal Ruach HaKodesh, how the Rebbe just sees through. And before I go further, I just want to say a parenthesis over here. A story of the Rebbe's Ruach HaKodesh that I heard from someone personally. His name is Binyamin Simons. He's a Yid in Sydney, Australia. He was actually just now, recently, in the shooting in Bondi, thank you. He was there. There's a video of him walking by and the terrorist, Yimach Shmai, not seeing him. And him and his wife are right behind this terrorist shooting, and they were both saved. So this Binyamin Simons has a story that I heard from him more than once. And he says that there was someone once not well in his family. And he was living in Sydney, Australia. And he called a relative of his that was going to go by the Rebbe. And he says, can you please ask the Rebbe a bracha for my child? So the relative says yes. The relative goes by the Rebbe. And he calls up his cousin, Binyamin Simons. And he says, the Rebbe has two things to tell you. Number one, you and your wife should start using your Jewish names at work. So Binyamin Simon says, first of all, that was already like, whoa, because whenever we wrote to the Rebbe, it was always with our Jewish names. When we were doing work, that's when we use our non-Jewish names. So the Rebbe says, tell him and his wife to start using their Jewish names. Number two, and this was really strange. Number two, fill up all the pushkas of your house, even the pushka on the steps. Does anybody have a pushka on their steps? We're on the steps. So he gets a shiver, and he right away goes to his steps to see which pushkas the Rebbe is talking about. And I was in his house. I was able to see this. So you come into the house, there's the dining room, you go a little further, then there's the steps that go up, and there's a little landing, then there are steps that continue up. He looks onto the landing, there's flowers there, and inside of those flowers, there's a pushka laying over there, tzedakah box. Now, where did that tzedakah box come from? So he says that a couple of months earlier, someone gave him a pushka, and he was going to put it in his kitchen, which is right past the staircase. But the kitchen was under construction, so they just left it, completely forgot about it. And the Rebbe, sitting in Brooklyn, sees, until Australia, through the person's house, seeing the pushka on the guy's steps. Can you imagine what that person must have felt? The Rebbe could see my pushka on my steps. What else does the Rebbe see? I mean, the Rebbe says, is the Rebbe a Bal Ruach HaKodesh that just sees what no one else sees? Is the Rebbe a Melumid B'Nissim? I mean, we can go on forever about the Rebbe's Nissim. Is the Rebbe a Tzaddik? Is the Rebbe a Bal Midas? These are all examples that the Rebbe gives. What is a Rebbe? And the Rebbe says they're all true. All of those are true. And again, I'm going to add in over here, if that's what talks to you, great. That's my Rebbe. But then what is the Rebbe? The Rebbe says, Ha'ikar Chaser. The main thing of what a Rebbe really is missing. What is a Rebbe? And what I'm going to say is obvious, I think, to a lot of people, but maybe it's time to think about it for real. all of us, especially on a day like Gimmel Tammuz. The Rebbe says what everybody needs to know is that a Rebbe is a Rosh. And I want to talk about that. A Rebbe is a Rosh. The Rebbe uses a lashon like this in the letter. I'll call echad ve'achas. That means male and female. No one's exempt. Ladas. Everybody has to know. And then the Rebbe explains, what does it mean to know? It's not like I read it in an article. Ladas, says the Rebbe, means, and I think everybody over here is familiar with these ideas. Ladas means what das means in Tanya. Das means that the Rebbe's word lizbainan, to literally stop, meditate on what a Rebbe is. We always thought that meditation was primarily thinking about Hashem, Gdulas Hashem. And in this letter, the Rebbe says, we need to be misbainan in what is a Rebbe, that who Hanasi v'Arosh. We need to know that he is the Rosh. That is what you need to be misbainan in. I'll call echad v'achas ladas, to spend time meditating on what a Rebbe is, that a Rebbe is a Rosh. Something interesting. When Bachurim would come into the Rebbe for their bar mitzvah, so the Rebbe would ask them questions, sometimes on what they're learning, sometimes on the Maimer, and sometimes on the halachas of tefillin that they're learning, that they just started putting on. And here's a question that the Rebbe would ask more than a few Bachurim. Okay, I heard this myself from a few people that told me that the Rebbe asked them this question. And I always had a theory of why the Rebbe did this. The Rebbe even spoke about in a sikha that he does this. And then finally I heard from one Yid that's how he understood what the Rebbe wanted from him. What was the question? So the Rebbe asks the Bacher, if chas v'shalom, a person doesn't have an arm, do they still put on the tefillin on their head? And the Bacher says yes, and it's halacha. Then the Rebbe asks, well, what if a person doesn't have a head? Do they still put it on their arm? And the Bacher always smiles and says, can't be. So sometimes the Rebbe would just smile. Sometimes, by the way, and the Rebbe spoke about this in a sikha, the Bacher would start giving a whole answer that theoretically, yes, it's okay. But many times, yeah. And that's what the Rebbe laughed about. The Rebbe says the Bacher's not thinking about the practical technicality that you can't exactly live without a head. But then many times, and what the way I heard stories from people was that the Rebbe would drill. The Rebbe would say, what happens if a person doesn't have a head? And the kid would say, it can't be. And the Rebbe would sometimes ask a third time. I know someone that the Rebbe asked, the Rebbe said, it happened. It happened. This is what the Rebbe said it to this person. Someone was running in war, and his head got blown off. Should he put on tefillin on his arm? So the Rebbe would sometimes drill. So there was another year that the Rebbe asked, should the person put on tefillin on his arm? And the kid gets like serious, and the kid says, like, I'm saying now what's going on in the kid's mind. The kid's thinking, wait a second, is it possible? Maybe it is possible to live without a head. And then the kid says to the Rebbe, you can't live without a head. And he says, as the Rebbe asked him for the third time, the Rebbe had a smirk on his face. The Rebbe was covering his face. And then as the kid said, you can't live without a head, the Rebbe took his hand off. And with a very serious face, the Rebbe said, Emes. The Kenish Leben on a cup. It's true, you can't live without a head. And the kid, this person said, what he understood right away from the Rebbe is, the Rebbe is telling the Bar Mitzvah Bacher, you need a Rosh B'nai Yisrael. You can't live without a Rosh B'nai Yisrael. It's not about whether you can live with a head or not. You know, the kid is thinking, wait, is it possible to live without a Rebbe? Maybe it is. No, you can't live without a Rebbe. The Rebbe said, Emes, that's correct. Share a story you may have heard. You may have heard the story that there's a Yid, he lives in Monsey. I forgot his first name right now, but his last name is Hassan. That's his last name. And he was living in a place called Gibraltar, somewhere I think near Spain. And he became very close to the Rebbe from there. He was not born to a Lubavitch family, but he was living there, and he became close to the Rebbe. He would write to the Rebbe, and he would even travel to the Rebbe. One of the times that he traveled, he lands in England, and he calls the Rebbe's office. Rabbi Klein answers the phone. He says, Rabbi Klein, please tell the Rebbe that I'm on my way. That's what he would do. He would inform the Rebbe that he's on his way. I guess a bracha for the trip. Rabbi Klein says, hold on a second. He managed to ask the Rebbe. And the Rebbe says to Rabbi Klein, find out from him how his sister is doing. Rabbi Klein says, how's your sister doing? Baruch Hashem. So Rabbi Klein says, no. If the Rebbe is asking how your sister is doing, go find out how your sister is doing. Okay, fine, I'll call. If there's any news, I'll call back. Fine, he hangs up. And in his mind, he says, he started to have some thoughts that maybe the Rebbe is mixing up. Maybe the Rebbe is mixing up people. The Rebbe doesn't know my sister. My sister has no connection to the Rebbe. Maybe even the opposite. Seems like his family was not very pro Lubavitch and the Rebbe. So was probably the Rebbe mixed up. But he says, the Rebbe asked, I'll call. He calls home, ring. No one answers. Okay, he gets onto the plane. Comes to New York. He lands, he comes to 770, and again he sends in a little zettel, a letter, informing the Rebbe that he arrived. Right away, when Yom Klein comes running back out, he says, the Rebbe asked to ask you how your sister's doing. Okay, now he knows that the Rebbe is not mistaken. Okay, so he right away goes to the phone, he starts calling until his mother answers the phone. She answers the phone, and he says, how's, let's say, I don't think I heard it with a name. Let's say, how's Rachel doing? How's Rachel doing? So his mother says, how do you know? He says, how's she doing? She's not doing well. How do you know? The Rebbe's asking. Oh, can you go ask the Rebbe for a bracha? Yeah, ask the Rebbe for a bracha. Goes and asks a bracha. What happened? What happened to his sister? Sister had given birth all while he had left, after he left, and Rahman al-Islam, she was losing a lot of blood. And she needed to be hospitalized. She lost blood, she lost consciousness. So he runs into the Rebbe. However, I don't know exactly how that looked. Did he come in right away? Did he write a zettel? He asked the bracha. And everybody sitting around this table knows the end of the story. His sister got better. You can usually guess that that's the end. She got better. But that's not the amazing part of the story for us. The fact that the end of the story is that it worked out, that's usually the way it works. But there's something more fascinating. After she recovers, she's still in the hospital. This younger brother of hers gives her a call. And he says, I want you to know, the Rebbe asked about you twice. You're very lucky. It's a big schos, and the Rebbe saved you. And she starts crying. And he's like, oh boy, I didn't mean that. Maybe now's not the time when she's in the hospital to show her that he was right and she was wrong. She calms down and she says, no, I need to tell you something. She says, remember one time you dragged me, and I'm going to say it the way I heard it. I don't know if this is a true fact. I just found it funny or not so funny, but this is the way I heard it. You dragged me by my ponytail, and you said to me, come, we're going to sit and learn Tanya right now. I didn't want to, but you made me. And you opened up a Perek-based Tanya. And you learned with me that there's a Reish B'nai Yisroel. And you told me, obviously, that we know who the Reish B'nai Yisroel is. It's the Rebbe. And I obviously didn't buy in, didn't talk to me. He says, but now, when I was losing consciousness, I remembered what you told me. That came to me, that there's a Reish B'nai Yisroel. And I wanted to tell our mother to go reach out to the Reish B'nai Yisroel. She says, I tried to talk and I couldn't. I didn't have energy to talk. Until, she says, I was basically passing out, and she says, and I thought in my head, Rebbe, if you are a Reish B'nai Yisrael, you know what's going on with me. I don't need to get in touch with you. And she says, now you're telling me that the Rebbe asked about me. So a Reish B'nai Yisrael is not only the way we maybe sometimes understand the Rebbe to be very empathetic, sympathetic, very feeling for everybody. It's a lot deeper than that. It's much deeper than that. It's infinitely deeper than that. It's not only that the Rebbe feels us because he's a sensitive person. Much deeper than that. The Rebbe feels us because we're connected. We are connected. And every Yid is connected. You may have heard this story. There was someone, it's irrelevant right now, the names, but there was someone that left whatever group they were in, and they became a Lubavitcher Chassid, the family. And it got pretty brutal. The group that he left from was not very happy. And not only did they try harming him, but they fired her from being a principal in the school that she was in. And she wrote to the Rebbe a letter. She wrote to the Rebbe a letter, I joined Lubavitch and I lost the job. I don't know what her point was. She was like lamenting, complaining. So the Rebbe writes back to her, you're a principal of a school. That means you know all of the details and all of the important stuff that you need to know about every child. If you were fired, that means that the new principal doesn't know that stuff yet. Doesn't know about each and every student, what they might be going through at home, or their challenges in learning. And that means that the principal is going to mistreat some of the kids, not understanding and knowing what each one of them are going through. So quickly, the first thing you need to do is go tell the new principal everything that she needs to know in order to educate these kids properly. I mean, that is a mind-blowing story. We're talking about kids of families that fired this woman because she became the Rebbe's chassid. And the Rebbe's worried about these kids, that they shouldn't be even hurt for a little bit. The principal must probably find out what she needed to a day later, 2 days later, a week later. But a moment of a kid being treated incorrectly, without sensitivity, the Rebbe can't handle that. And again, that's because, not just because the Rebbe is kind and the Rebbe is sensitive, but because every Yid is connected to the Rebbe. This is why the Rebbe is so much about Achdus Yisroel. Achdus Yisroel. There's something that people I think don't know. Maybe you do. I'm guessing everybody heard of the Maimer Va'ata Tetzaves B'nei Yisrael. It's a famous Maimer, right? The last Maimer that the Rebbe gave us. Va'ata Tetzaves B'nei Yisrael, which talks all about what a Rebbe is, what Moshe Rabbeinu is. Talks all about Galus. There's a piece of the Maimer that's not spoken about, I think, enough. And it's close to the end of the Maimer. So if I would ask anybody over here, or really anybody, tell me what Ba'ata Tetzaves B'nei Yisrael means, according to the Maimer, everybody's right away going to say, okay, Tetzaveh, number one, doesn't just mean command. Tetzaveh means connection. Everybody knows that. Every Lubavitcher knows that. And if you don't yet, now you do. So Tetzaveh means connection, not just command. And Va'ata and Moshe Rabbeinu connects every Yid with Hashem. How does that work? Isn't every Yid already connected to Hashem? Yeah, there's the whole Maimer. But here, there's the end of the Maimer where the Rebbe says something that, again, I think people don't pay enough attention to and don't talk about enough. The Rebbe says, you know what Ba'ata Tetzaves B'nei Yisrael means? And you, Moshe Rabbeinu, are Metzaveh, connect B'nei Yisrael to each other. I'm not talking about the connection that a Yid has to Hashem. The Rebbe brings connection between Yidden, that Yidden should feel each other. If he is the Rosh of me, and he is the Rosh of another Yid, that makes us part of the same body. We have the same Rosh. I don't know if I ever saw this clearly. I feel like I did. Why do we say Hareini Mekabel before we daven? Everybody knows the basic explanation, I think. Yes, I'll just share it quickly if you don't know. Because to Hashem, it's very important that Yidden get along like a parent. Emirtz Hashem, everybody over here should be Zeichet to be a parent of many children, like the Rebbe wants, like Hashem wants. And you should be able to see this firsthand, that a parent, the biggest pleasure to a parent is when the children are getting along. The biggest nachas ruach. And the most painful thing to a parent is, in a certain way, even more painful, when a kid rejects the parent, when a kid rebels against the parent. Even more painful is when the children themselves are not getting along. That's painful. That's why before you come and daven and you want Hashem to be, so to speak, in a giving mood, You say Hareini Makabel. You say we're all getting along. You have to think about what you're saying. Hareini Makabel alayim etzasasi shal v'ahavta l'recha kam moicha. Hashem is thrilled. Now you can go start speaking to Hashem, and Hashem's going to shower. Hashem's going to shower. I was once in a shul. It was not a Chabad shul. I have to go off a little bit. This is Geschmack. Not in a Chabad shul. And someone asks the Rav, in their community, they also said Hareini Makabel. So someone says to the Rav, Kvod Rav, what if I don't feel it? Should I still say Hareini Makabel? So the Rav says, Al tagid et zeh, don't say it. Ani lo mer et zeh. Says, I don't say it. I don't feel it, I don't say it. Which connects me right away to another Geschmack and Maisa, that I have a friend that's a Kohen. Beautiful story. A friend that's a Kohen. And by Svardim, they do Birchas Kohenim every day. By us, we don't. By Ashkenazim, we don't. And in some areas, we're like Ashkenaz, some areas, we're like Sfarad, we don't do Birchas Kohenim every day. So when a Ashkenazi Yid is in a Sfaradish shul, often they'll walk out by Birchas Kohenim if they don't want to do it. So I have a friend that would walk out from a Sfaradish shul in Queens. He would walk out every time. And very often he would meet a rabbi from Young Israel. He was also Ashkenazi rabbi, and he would also walk out. One day, this Ashkenazi rabbi says to my friend, he says, I don't understand you. He says, I can't do Birchas Kohenim every day. Because Birchas Kohenim needs to be done be'ahava. Right? In the bracha, they say, Levarech es Ama Yisroel be'ahava, with love. He says, I can't feel love every day. He says, but you're Chabad. You're Chabad. You guys know how to have love. So why can't you do it? So in other words, the Rebbe taught us Achdus Yisrael. Why? Because the Rebbe is the Reish Bnei Yisrael. So we understand Achdus Yisrael. There's a story that you may know. Again, I'm guessing a lot of you do know it. Maybe everybody. It's a story that the Rebbe said in the first Maimer. But I want to talk about a detail that's less known. There's a famous story of the Alter Rebbe, that there was a woman that gave birth, and the Alter Rebbe, although in the first Maimer the Rebbe did not write this, I don't remember if the Rebbe said it, that it was on Yom Kippur. And the Alter Rebbe went himself, and he chopped some wood, and he cooked the soup, and he gave it to the eldest. He gave it to this woman that had just given birth. It's a story everybody knows. The Rebbe said it in his first Maimer. Now, what's interesting is, and the Rebbe once spoke about this, that this was not a story that Chassidim used to say. This was not a well-known story. Okay, so we in Der Shvi, it's a very well-known story, and you'll hear why. It was not a well-known story. Why? Chassidim didn't know how to explain it. I'm not sure why, but it wasn't one of those stories that they used to say. The Rebbe says about himself, the Rebbe says, the Frierdiker Rebbe told me the story. And the Frierdiker Rebbe knew about me that I'm not going to hold the story a secret. That's what the Rebbe says. However you want to understand that. It could be, I can understand it in two ways. Either because the Rebbe was against secrets. If you know something, share it. If it can help another person, share. That's the Rebbe's shita as a whole. The Rebbe encouraged other people to share. The Rebbe shared everything he had. The Rebbe shared with us. Huh?
So I had the other half while I do.
Oh, good question. Okay, fine. I don't know. But the Rebbe shears and shears and shears non-stop. That could be the reason. Or the Rebbe is saying that the Frierdiker Rebbe knows me. If I hear a good story about Avos Yisrael, that I'm going to share. I will not hold back a story that gives over Avos Yisrael. Another parenthesis over here before I go further. There was a certain Rebbe that used to find Avos Yisrael in every single parsha. Every parsha, he had a drasha about Avos Yisrael. Anyway, it comes to Parshas Balak. We're getting there soon. And what are you going to say about Avos Yisrael and Balak? Balak is literally, the whole parsha is a conversation between two anti-Semites. That's what it is. That's it. You could say, don't be an anti-Semite, but literally it's a conversation between two guys. That's it. Balak and Bilam both hate us. They're trying to curse us unsuccessfully. And that's it. There isn't discussion about a Yid. I mean, it's about the Yidden being cursed, but there isn't anything happening between Yidden. So the Rebbe gets up, and the Chassidim are waiting. Okay, how's he gonna figure out how to say Avos Yisrael in this parsha? So he gets up and he says, "This parsha is all about Avos Yisrael." Everybody's looking at him. The name of the parsha is obviously Yisroel. Balak. Beis, Ve'ahavta, Lamed, L'reacha, Kuf, Kamaycha. People are looking at him. It's not exactly how you spell Ve'ahavta, L'reacha, Kamaycha. So it's not a Beis, it's a Vav. It's not a Kuf, it's a Kaf. So they're waiting for him. He says, exactly. That's not the way you spell it. But if you truly love a Jew, you truly love another Jew, a Vase can become a Vav, and a Vav can become a Vase, a Kuf can become... You can change everything if you truly love another Jew. So, the Rebbe says, the Friedrich Rebbe knew, I'm not going to hold back the story. Ich will machen a trask. Trask means like a shturim. I'm going to make a lot of noise about the story. We already know, in hindsight, the Rebbe, first Maimer, the Rebbe already said the story. The Rebbe, so to speak, I can't really use these words, so to speak, couldn't hold himself back from the first Maimer, the Rebbe already says the story. And the Rebbe repeated the story more than once. And the Rebbe said in that Farbrengen, which is I think in the Mems, the 80s, the Rebbe says, so if I didn't yet officially make enough noise about it, I am officially making noise about it right here, right now. That the Alter Rebbe went himself and helped the Yid. Fine. Now the Rebbe explained, they have to understand the story. This is not a story of Ruach HaKodesh. The Alter Rebbe knew that there's someone that no one even knew about. He has knowledge that people don't know. He was able to see what's going on in the corner of the town. That's not what the story is. The story is that the Alter Rebbe felt. It's much more than knowing. The Alter Rebbe felt the need of a Yid. That's the way you have to understand the story. It's not a story of Ruach HaKodesh. It's a story of feeling another Yid because the Alter Rebbe is a Reish B'nai Yisrael. Something fascinating, which I didn't know until this year, that it was Yom Kippur, Tafshin Lamed Zayin, between Shachris and Musaf, and there was a Chassid, Reb Shlomo Madanshe, that gets summoned to the Rebbe's room, or to the Rabbi Chadikov's room. It was a pretty interesting time to be called in, but he knew if Rabbi Chadikov is calling him in between Shachris and Musaf, between Musaf and Mincha of Yom Kippur, this is like that 1 hour that we have a break, being called in by Rabbi Chadikov, something's urgent. Rabbi Chadikov calls him in, and he says, I got orders from the higher-ups, from the Rebbe basically, that a new organization needs to be opened up in Eretz Yisrael. An organization that helps mothers that have just given birth. And the organization should be called Shifra Ampua. So if you know that organization, and again, Emirat Hashem, you should get to know that organization. Shifra Ampua, which helps mothers and families of someone that had just given birth. The Rebbe created that organization on Yom Kippur. Now, Shlomo Madanchik walks out of the Rebbe's room, and he's thinking, Yom Kippur, something feels familiar. He says, the story of the Alter Rebbe, on Yom Kippur, going to help the eldest. Now, what's amazing is, the Alter Rebbe, so to speak, opened the path. He went himself, helped a woman. What does the Rebbe do? The Rebbe opens an organization on Yom Kippur to help women for eternity. Till today, years later, the Rebbe worried about the women that are going to give birth today. And the Rebbe opened an organization for them. In other words, the Rebbe took this Reish B'nai Yisrael to a new level. I guess I'll stop for a little bit and we'll sing a niggin. I'll walk out. So before you sing a niggin, you must probably sing a niggin of the Rebbe. Niggin of the Rebbe. And to know that the Rebbe says that when you sing a niggin of a Rebbe, you bring the Rebbe in. It's like the Rebbe standing right there. And the Rebbe said, when you say a story of a Rebbe, you're connecting to the Rebbe's Levush HaMaisa. When you say a Torah of the Rebbe, you're connecting to the Rebbe's Dibur. When you sing a niggin of a Rebbe, you're connecting to the Rebbe's thoughts, the Rebbe's machshava. So when you sing the niggin, understand that you're inviting the Rebbe in. Like we spoke about before, you're opening a window for the Rebbe to enter. And again, when you think about the Rebbe, you can think all types of things. But again, the first and foremost, most important thing to know is you're thinking about our Reish, the Reish B'nai Yisrael that is connected to us, that feels us every single moment of the day, that worries about us every single moment of the day.
As Gimmel Tammuz is coming close, I realized that the biggest gift, as our rabbi said today, is that having Yisroel, and it's not a lack of Yisroel, but joining together, not the greatest gift we could give the Rebbe. So we Baruch Hashem joined together. I told my wife that I related to this, so I would read that. And Baruch Hashem sits here in Crown Heights, and we're providing learning, community, and support. It's not just classes, there's also community, and there's also support, personal support. Sukala, if you're sick, and Charlie Kumol would like some soup delivered. We are here for you, for any need. Feel free to reach out, be left around, and we're also to our clothing. Find out more about what we do. We're actually under America's Ashlokim here in Crown Heights to be here and support singles and new marrieds, and we also are recently government division, which is separate as well. But if you want to hear more about it, save this, reach out. We are here for you. Thank you so much.
First of all, I just remembered a good story. As I was walking in, so someone said, because I was matriach a whole bunch of people to stand up. So someone said, Kasha Kriyas Yamsuf. It's like as hard as Kriyas Yamsuf to get everybody to get by. So I said, first of all, it's not Kriyas Yamsuf because I walked on the side of everybody, not between. But I remembered a good story that, two good stories actually. So one, I actually last year heard it from the person themselves. I always heard the story, loved the story, but I just heard it from someone that was there. So it's actually my cousin. I'm guessing you heard of Rabbi Simon Jacobson. His wife is Shandy Jacobson. So she said the story that she was there. That it was one Shabbos. And she says her husband, until today, when he comes on Shabbos to 770, he's very available. He'll talk to anybody about anything. He knows a lot. Very intelligent person, knows the Rebbe Sichos, wrote up the Rebbe Sichos, and he's always available if anybody wants to talk to him about anything. And she says she waits around. I don't know if always. She says usually she doesn't necessarily appreciate it that much. She says, but there's one time that she thanks him for taking his time because she got to see something. What did she get to see? She says she's outside 770 waiting, and the Rebbe comes out of 770. The Rebbe comes out of 770, it's on Shabbos, and the Rebbe's walking, and as we know, when the Rebbe walks, a pathway is made, a shvil. And there's a girl, a young girl, on either side of this pathway. And she's watching together with everybody, and everybody sort of freezes. No one knows what to do. Now, was it halachically okay for the Rebbe to walk by? We're talking about young girls. But we know the Rebbe is the top level of halacha and hidur. So everybody was frozen. What are they going to do? It's too late. The Rebbe needs to go by. No one knows what to do. Everybody understands, right? When something scary happens, you either freeze, fight, or flight, right? So over here, everybody froze. The Rebbe walks up to one of the girls, whispers something in her ear. She lights up. She runs across the path to the other girl, whispers something in her ear. She lights up. Now they're both on the same side of the path. The Rebbe walks by. Everybody wants to know what happened. So the girl says, the Rebbe whispered in my ear, go tell the other girl, good Shabbos from me. So this girl felt like $1 million. She gets to be a shliach to pass on the good Shabbos. Everybody feels good, and the Rebbe can walk through. It's an amazing story. Again, we're not talking about sensitivity. We're talking about something much, much deeper. Achtos. Then another story came to mind about the Kashka Kriyas Yamsuf. There's a story, I forgot who it's with. I think we know that there was a guy that came by the Rebbe. I think it was Shimshon Stock. Yeah, I believe so. Came by the Rebbe and he says to the Rebbe, not finding a shidduch. He was another character that was able to speak to the Rebbe a little differently. There's a video of him coming by the Rebbe and he says to the Rebbe, we need you. You have to be gesund or something like that. And the Rebbe says to him, like, talk to Hashem, like not to me. And he says, I don't know Hashem. I know you, Rebbe. He said something like that. Like, I need you for the brachas. I don't know. Something like that. But anyway, he had a certain way of speaking. So he tells the Rebbe, I can't find the shidduch. It's kasha kriyas yamsuf. So the Rebbe says, ki kriyas yamsuf, like kriyas yamsuf, not that hard. And mamish, like a month later, he found the shidduch. With that Rebbe's one word kit, only like kriyas yamsuf, he found the shidduch. But I want to continue on this topic. Again, this is something that we speak about a lot. Obviously, always something to internalize, not just to be inspired by the Rebbe, but much deeper, to realize that the Rebbe is not just a loving father, but the Rebbe is our Rosh. It's much deeper than a loving father. The Rebbe is also a loving father, but the Rebbe is deeper than that. The Rebbe is literally the Rosh of who we are. And listening to him, we're doing ourselves a favor, the biggest favor. And bringing him into our lives, this is the best thing we can do for ourselves. But again, the way we understand this is usually from stories of seeing how the Rebbe has a sensitivity that's beyond human, to everybody. Men, women, children, young children, older adults, elderly, every type of person. So I want to share with you a story that was always one of my favorites. Only lately did a new detail come out of the story, which made the story 100 times better. So there's a girl who's becoming bas mitzvah in the year Tafshin Mem or Mem Aleph. I can actually tell you because I brought it with me. I wanted to share it. Tafshin Mem Beis, I'm sorry. Okay? She's becoming bas mitzvah in Tafshin Mem Beis. Vav Tishrei Tafshin Mem Beis. Her name is Shoshana Saxon. You may have heard the story. You may have not heard the addition to the story that only came out a couple of years ago. It's a story I remember hearing as a young boy. Always one of my most amazing stories. She's writing a bas mitzvah letter to the Rebbe, asking the Rebbe a bracha that she should, we actually have her letter, asking the Rebbe a bracha that she should be matzliach in being a girl that's a bas Yisroel. I'll pass it around soon if you want to see all her words. That's her first letter she's writing to the Rebbe. She never wrote to the Rebbe. So it's very special to her. And she asks her brother, younger brother, couldn't have been that old. She asks her brother, is it okay if I also give the Rebbe a bracha, not just ask for a bracha? This young, not even 12-year-old girl, already thinking that maybe I should also give, not only take. It's pretty amazing. So she says, I want to give the Rebbe a bracha. Is that okay? He's like, I don't know. So she says, so how do I do it? I'm a little shy. Maybe it's not the right thing. So he said, I have an idea for you. Genius idea. This is her younger brother. What's his idea? He learned in school that in Russia, the Chassidim, when they wanted to say certain things to each other, they had code words, right? So for example, they never wrote Rebbe, or they never spoke about the Rebbe like a Rebbe. They spoke about him like the Zayda, the grandfather. That was like the way they spoke about him, and everybody knew that was the code. They have many, many codes. So one of the codes that they had was a code language. How did it work? If I wanted to write something with a mem, instead, I wrote it with a nun. It was always the letter after. So the example that's always been given, and you'll see it in letters, is when they would write about Maimid. So Maimid is money that Chassidim give to support the Rebbe personally, the Rebbe's family personally. It's called Maimid. You, so to speak, uphold the Rebbe, which is a very, very special thing to get stuck to the Rebbe. So when they wanted to write Maimid, or collecting Maimid, they wouldn't write Mem, Ayin, Mem, Dalid. They would write Nun instead of a Mem, Fei instead of an Ayin. Then, so it's Mem, Ayin, Mem, again a Nun. And then, instead of a Dalid, Maimid, you write a Hey. So it's Nifne instead of Maimid. That was the word. So he heard this in school. It's actually on every mezuzah in the back, you also have Hashem's name written in that same code language. That's where they got it from. So he thinks about this idea. He says, listen, why don't you write to the Rebbe in that code language? If the Rebbe gets it, great. If not, it's just going to be a whole bunch of olive bays. Like, what's wrong with that? And that's exactly what she does. It's exactly what she does. She writes to the Rebbe in code language, which again, I'm going to pass around. She writes a whole bunch of olive bays, okay? On the bottom, you just see a mixture of olive bays. I'm going to pass it around. And she writes, I'm forgetting the exact wording right now, but she writes, benching the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin sheyevaldu lahem, that they should give birth. Never mind that the Rebbe is already 80 years old, and the Rebbetzin older than that, 80, 81. That she didn't even think about, which is something to think about. Bechlal, that to a young girl, the innocence of a young girl, Avram could give birth at 100. It's fine. The Rebbe give birth, so she gives a bracha to the Rebbe that they should give birth to a child, and she sends it off. Not long later, she gets a letter back, and I have that letter as well. I try to print the final draft, the final letter, but I have the draft. Okay. On the letter, the Rebbe writes a couple of letters on the bottom. So she says she picks it up and she reads the letter, a regular letter to a bas mitzvah girl, and then at the bottom it says a whole bunch of olive bays. And in her mind, it's some sort of signature. She shows her brother the letter, and her brother says, "No, the Rebbe writes in your code language, Taida al habracha. Thank you for your bracha." Now that was always an amazing story. It is an amazing story. But the best part of the story is yet to come. What's the best part of the story that again was just discovered a couple of years ago? That actually her genius brother got the code wrong. He got it exactly backwards. So if a mem is supposed to become a nun, instead the mem became a lamed. Okay, so the letter before instead of the letter after. So you can already imagine, no one can read this code language. This is a made-up code language that she made up, or her brother made up. Okay? Now the Rebbe, look at this. I'm going to show you this now. The Rebbe, when the Rebbe asked the letter to be written up, the Rebbe wrote in code language, "Thank you for the bracha." Then the Rebbe said, "Bring it back to me before you send it. Lehar'eni, show it to me before you actually send it." They brought it back to the Rebbe crossed it out, because originally the Rebbe wrote Toida ala bracha in the real code language. In the real code language. And the Rebbe, so to speak, realized she's not going to understand that code, because she clearly knows the wrong code. She's not going to understand what he's writing. So the Rebbe crossed it out and rewrote Toida ala bracha in her code language. So this is a code language between the Rebbe and her. So the Rebbe, first of all, had to crack this code. All these letters. The Rebbe could have looked at it and just said, okay, a whole bunch of nice letters. Instead, the Rebbe had to crack a code that this girl made up. Not only that, the Rebbe writes back in her code language that she should understand that he's thanking her for the bracha. I mean, this is an incredible story. First of all, I just want to pass it around so people can see it. And by the way, looking at the "I want Mashiach now," I would guess that that's just a whole bunch of letters, right? But the Rebbe didn't guess that. And I want to try to explain a little bit more about that story. Maybe pass it around and that. The Rebbe is crossing out. Here, you want to pass that as well? Maybe as it's passed around, I just want to talk a little bit about that. So I always love this story. And I think there's a few things to take from the story. And then there's the main thing to take from the story. The few are, number one, this girl had something very straight in her head, that we can't only be takers, receivers. We got to give. We have to give. Not just ask the Rebbe for brachas, but ask the Rebbe, what can I give you? What can I give you, Rebbe? There's that beautiful video, I don't know if you saw it, where a boy, his name is actually related to me, his name is Yisroel Gansberg. He's a young boy, and he wanted to give the Rebbe something. And it's Pesach, and it's going to be Kaishal Bracha. That's his opportunity to give the Rebbe something. So what can he give the Rebbe? So he finds, anybody familiar with lady fingers? Okay, those nasty. Okay, so that was like the only thing that used to exist. That's what I grew up with. Lady, that was the only thing that you were able to eat that wasn't like matzah and potatoes. So he goes and he takes a few unbroken lady fingers, and he says, "My mother saw that I'm taking some lady fingers." She's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Nothing." He knew much worse than stealing lady fingers is to tell his mother that he plans on giving these lady fingers to the Rebbe. So he's nothing. He slowly gets those lady fingers out, puts it into a napkin, puts it into his pocket. It's Achron Shal Pesach. He's coming by the Rebbe Kosh Shal Bracha. He didn't tell his father. There's actually a picture of this. And he takes the cookies out and he gives it to the Rebbe, right last second. The Rebbe takes it, the Rebbe opens it, and the Rebbe says, "Was soll ich tun mit them? What should I do with this?" So he says, "I said what my mother would always tell me, macha bracha." Says, "Make a bracha." What are you supposed to do with it? Make a bracha. And the Rebbe smiled. But that, that idea of wanting to give back, wanting to give. So that's number one. Just this idea that we, in addition to take and take and take from the Rebbe, which the Rebbe is happy to give, wants to give, we also give to the Rebbe. Number two, nothing is too big for the Rebbe. Don't underestimate the Rebbe's brachas. Do not underestimate. She's imagining the Rebbe can give birth at age 80. That's the way a chassid should believe. The Rebbe can do anything. There was a chassid, maybe you heard the story, Reb Zalman Garari, came into the Rebbe, and he says to the Rebbe, "I need a bracha for an operation, and it should be successful." So the Rebbe says to him, "Why don't you ask that you shouldn't have an operation? Why are you asking that the operation should be successful?" So he says, "Okay, so I shouldn't have a." So I said, "No. Not like it's not one of those annoying stories that it's like, oh, I should have, could have, would have, but didn't." The Rebbe, I think, was saying, if you don't have that level of belief, if you don't believe that I can help you not even have an operation, then it's not going to really help. Again, you got to open the window. There's a great story, it's a very important story, about a tzaddik, a Rebbe, that a Yid used to come to him every year and ask for ashiros. He wants to be rich. And he had a cow, and the cow used to give milk. And he would ask the Rebbe, his Rebbe, for ashiros, and his Rebbe would bench him with ashiros, and every year he did not become an usher. He didn't become wealthy. One year, his cow died. He comes to his Rebbe the following year, and he says, "I need a bracha for richness, for ashiros, for wealth." And his Rebbe gives him a bracha to be wealthy, and that year he becomes wealthy. So he comes back to his Rebbe the next year. He says, "I don't understand. Until now, I had a source of livelihood. I would ask you for a bracha for wealth. You gave the bracha and it never worked. When I lose my source of income and I ask for wealth, then the bracha works. Doesn't make sense." So his Rebbe says, no, exactly. Every time you asked for wealth, in your mind, wealth meant your cow. It should give a lot of milk. That was like your understanding of wealth. Okay, if that's your understanding of wealth, that's the type of wealth I can give you. As soon as your cow finally died, now you have to start thinking about other sources of income. You became creative. You opened yourself up. Now I can give you a bracha for ashiras, and you can actually become wealthy. So we have to stop limiting the Rebbe. Don't limit the Rebbe. I need to marry this person. Give a bracha that it should work. Tell the Rebbe, find me the best person. Any bracha that you're looking for, don't limit the Rebbe to your limited way of thinking how the bracha can come true. Ask the Rebbe for a bracha and write to the Rebbe. This is a lashon you can use. "Rebbe, give me a bracha the way you understand it. The way you understand it. Give me wealth the way you know wealth." That way you're not thinking in your limited mind. So number one, we give back. Number two, don't limit the Rebbe and his brachas. And number three, to know, this is the most important, I think, the Rebbe has a code language with every single person. Every individual has their code language. The Rebbe is not speaking this generic, all-inclusive language. Someone said, and I don't know this for a fact, but someone sounds like he did the research, the Rebbe almost never uses the word, when the Rebbe talks about Yidden, Klal Yisroel, the Jewish people. The Rebbe says, Kol Echad V'Achas MiYisrael. The Rebbe speaks to individuals. Someone once asked the Rebbe, it's an interesting request. He asked the Rebbe, he says, "I'm on Shlichus. Can you send me your Farbrengen of Shabbos before you Farbring? Send me the Farbrengen. I can Farbring about what you're going to Farbring about on Shabbos. Send it to me before." So the Rebbe says to him, "No, I can't." Why? The Rebbe said, because, listen to this. I never knew this until a few years ago. We always heard these stories, but now you hear it from the Rebbe himself. The Rebbe says, because sometimes when someone walks in, I say something specifically for them. When they walk into the Farbrengen, I said something specifically to them. We always heard stories that people walked in, and as they walked in, they heard something. The Rebbe says, I can't write it to you because I, so to speak, don't know what I'm going to say. It really depends on what people need to hear. So think about the Rebbe in that way, that the Rebbe speaks your personal code language, meaning to say, when the Rebbe is speaking a sikha, the Rebbe is having in mind every single individual on an individualistic level. The Rebbe has you in mind personally. The Rebbe is my personal Reish. Another great story that I personally like, and that's why I'm sharing with you, as I said before, Zeki Li. I'm sharing with you my Rebbe, right? But of course, this is the Rebbe. And again, any story where you see this element of Reish is an important story. That this element where the Rebbe is sensitive to the individual, but not just because he's an amazing, sensitive human being, but because he's literally our Reish. So another favorite of my stories is, and it's not a story, it's a video you can watch, and you may have watched it, and you may have thought about it, you may have not thought about it, but if anybody, definitely some people over here have heard me. Maybe you heard this. One of the Farbrengens or Shiurim, I said this, that a girl comes by the Rebbe. And she's holding a doll. If you never saw this video, it's very worthwhile watching. She's holding a doll. And the Rebbe gives $1 to the girl, and then the Rebbe tries giving $1 to the doll. And the people around, as if the Rebbe doesn't know, they start telling the Rebbe it's a doll. Now, I would imagine the Rebbe knows that. I mean, first of all, anybody knows what a doll is. Number two, when the Rebbe looks at a person, he sees a neshama, so he must probably knows that there's no neshama in that doll. Actually, there's a recording of the Rebbe saying, this is important, the Rebbe speaks about how little girls hold dolls. The Rebbe uses the word doll in English. And the Rebbe says, because from a very young age, a girl already has her motherly instinct to be like a mother, and that's why they take care of their dolls. But listen to how it goes further. So the Rebbe wants to give her a doll, and $1. And the people around are saying it's a doll. You see on the video, they're telling the Rebbe. And the Rebbe's insisting to give the doll $1. And the Rebbe does that. The girl takes $1 for the doll. Now that's just a nice story, but stop and think about the story for a second. Stop and think about it. To this girl, this doll is real. There's a reason why she brought the doll to the Rebbe. This doll is real. And anybody that has a younger sibling, or you remember yourself, or you have a daughter, and again, every opportunity to give a bracha, everybody should be zeicha to that. Zara chaya v'kayoma, very soon. Girls take their dolls very seriously. As the Rebbe himself said, they have this motherly feeling toward the doll. Boys, for some reason, do not have the fatherly instinct at a young age, which is why they might treat dolls a little differently. I know I have sons and daughters, and I see the difference. And boys can sometimes be very not sensitive to the dolls. And it can hurt the girls a lot when the boy takes the doll and throws it across the room like a football, and the girl's like, my baby, right? So to the girl, this doll is real. Now just understand, we're talking about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. We're talking about $1 from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which everybody knows. It's world famous, the dollars of the Rebbe. People pay money. I don't know if you know this. People outside Lubavitch, I know more than one person, that paid more than $1,000 to own $1 of the Rebbe. Sometimes people did fundraisers and they sell $1 and people bought it. Non-Lubavitch people. I know someone that sits very friendly to Lubavitch. This guy, actually, I just spoke to him today. He called me today. He needs a bracha. Maybe let me just say his name over here. But Chassidus Farbrengen can uftan. Can malach machal nicht uftan, right? Chassidus Farbrengen can accomplish major things. So I'll just say his name. Yitzchak Isaac ben Fega Yachat. Shlema l'chaim. He's responsible for a very, very amazing organization that helps almanas and agonis and yesayimim. He collects money for them. He collects a lot of money. He's not a Chabad Chassid, but he's a huge Chassid on the other hand. And he actually got the Rebbe's name into the art scroll. Every single art scroll Gemara, Hebrew, English, Gemara, has the Rebbe, the Rebbitzin, and the Frierdiker Rebbe's name in it, thanks to this guy. Yeah, and he put it in a few years ago. Why was I saying it? Why was I talking about him? I'm forgetting.
The dollar. He won $1.
Also, he sits with $1 of the Rebbe right in front of him. I met people. I'll share just a quick little story, and there's many of these stories. I was once in Florida, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and I'm going through the security, and the security guard over there at the security says to me, Happy Rosh Hashanah. Okay, nice, thank you. Okay, I say, you're Jewish? No, Italian. Okay. He says, you're Lubavitch? Lubavitch. Usually you could hear, are you Hasidic? Are you Chabad? Like, you're Lubavitch? I'm like, wow, I am. He says, let me show you something. He pulls me through security, takes out his wallet, takes out $1. This guy takes out $1. On it is written, Lubavitch Rebbe David Levy. I forgot exactly what he did in Israel, but this guy was part of the security team of someone from Israel. He came by the Rebbe, and he has $1 that he carries around wherever he goes. He said, I told the rabbi when he gave me $1, he's like, no, thank you. Like he thought the Rebbe's tipping him. He's like, no, thank you. Then he says, then they told me, no, this is a blessing. And he said, he carries this wherever he goes. This guy carries $1 of the Rebbe. So I pulled out a picture of the Rebbe, and I said to him, do you want a picture of the rabbi? He says, no, I have a more updated picture hanging in my house. A guy has an updated picture. I'm giving him an old-fashioned picture. He's got something later, And I met another Yid once in France, a non not yet from Yid that had a lot of stores, carries around $1 wherever he goes. So we're talking about $1 of the Rebbe. $1 of the Rebbe is famous for the brachas that it carries, and the Rebbe gives one of these dollars to a doll. Why? Because to this girl, the doll is real. To the Rebbe, it's real. That's a Rosh. That's a Rosh B'nai Yisrael. There's just a nice little quick thought. It says about when someone, Rahman al-Islam, kills someone, the shogeg, right? Mistakenly, or not even mistakenly, accidentally, he goes to Galus. And it says that Maglin Rabbi Imoy. You send his rabbi with him to Galus. So the Rebbe once pointed out, and the reason is because it says in the Psukim, it says you have to give him life. And if he's someone that learns, he needs his teacher, he needs his Rebbe. So you send the Rebbe to Galus with him. So the Rebbe once pointed out in the Sikha, the Rebbe said, we don't say we just send the Rebbe to him. We say Maglin Rabbi Imay, which means his Rebbe needs to go into Galus, meaning to say he needs to feel the Galus, needs to feel it. Otherwise, he's not a real Rebbe. If his student is in Galus and he feels I'm just living here, but I'm not suffering Galus, then it's not a real Rebbe. That's a real Rebbe. Now, with that all said, there's another side to the coin. A Rosh, when we talk about a Rosh B'nai Yisrael, we're talking about two things. Number one, and this needs to be drilled home again and again and again and again, that the Rebbe feels you where you're at, the Rebbe has a code language with you, the Rebbe is sensitive to your childish needs and to your strange ideas. The Rebbe is sensitive to all that. And all of those hundreds and thousands of stories that there are that bring this out. But then there's another side, and it's all the same Rosh. The Rosh that feels every Aver also tells every Aver what to do. Now, if you don't feel me, don't tell me what to do. If you don't feel me, don't tell me what I should do, and don't tell me my expectations. Only if you feel me can I then hear from you what I'm supposed to do. There's a great line. I don't know who the creator of it is. It goes, I don't care what you know until I know that you care. I don't care what you know until I know that you care. After I know that you care, I care what you know. So don't tell me what I should do if you don't understand me. So the first thing we need to understand is that the Rebbe understands. And then we have a whole nother, so to speak, Rebbe that we know that pushes us and pushes us and pushes us. And I want to go back to that bacher that I told you that called me up and said he sees the Rebbe and it just causes pressure. I think that's because he only knows the Rosh as the manig, the Rosh that says, go here, do that. You can do more. You can do more. And every time he looks at the Rebbe, all he hears is, you can do more. And it's without the first element of Rosh, which is, I feel you, I know you, I care for you, I know exactly what you're going through. And I'm the one that's telling you, don't fall into victimhood. Don't become a Nebuch. Only a Rebbe can tell you. Only a Rebbe can tell you that. After he knows exactly where you are, he can tell you, get up and go. There was a Yid, passed away last year, my father's first cousin. His name was Rabbi Lipsker. You heard of him? Yeah? Aleph Institute. So I want to tell you two stories. He once brought a group of prisoners, inmates. He brought them to the Rebbe. To Farbrengen. You may have heard the story. He brings them to the Rebbe, and before the Rebbe comes down to the Farbrengen, the Rebbe sends a message to them. Separate the people in the group. They shouldn't be sitting together. Let them sit all over 770. Why? And the Rebbe wasn't going to come in until this was done. Why? Because when a group comes in, it's natural to ask, who's this group? Oh, they're prisoners. Oh, you say, what happens when you hear they're prisoners? One of two things. Either you say, I want to have nothing to do with them, or you look at them like a whole bunch of nebachs, as I said before, like poor people, they're in jail. Or you just say, I want to stay away from these people. So the Rebbe said, separate them, so no one looks at them like a group. Fine. Wow, the sensitivity. After he did that, the Rebbe comes in 770. But little did he know that there was more. During the Farbrengen, the Rebbe is going to talk about prisoners. Remember we said the Rebbe is going to talk to people. And if the Rebbe would talk about prisoners, and this group is a group of prisoners, where do you think everybody's eyes are going to be when the Rebbe says that there's something called prisoners? Okay, I'll wait a second. I'll wait for everybody to settle. Can I know? So the Rebbe is going to start speaking about prisoners, and everybody's going to look at that group. It's just natural, right? You try not to, but it's just natural. Now, what does the Rebbe say about prisoners? The Rebbe says, why does someone end up in jail? Why does someone end up in jail? So you would answer, because they did a crime. So the Rebbe says, that's not a reason. That's not an automatic consequence of doing a crime. The haraya, what's the proof? There are many people that do crimes that don't end up in jail. That's the proof. So it's not inevitable that you end up in jail if you do a crime. By the way, the better of a criminal you are, the less of a chance you'll end up in jail. So it's not automatic. So why do some people end up in jail? Because they're the ones that are caught. Well, why are they the ones that are caught? Because they're shlamazah. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. The Rebbe didn't say that. Okay, what did the Rebbe say? Because these people, only the Rebbe could say this. Because these people are types of people that can transform a place like jail. Hashem needs them in jail because only a person like that is able to transform jail into a better place. I have to make another parenthesis. I mentioned a kohen before, so someone told me that it's their uncle, this kohen that I mentioned before. So another quick story that he told me. The story that he told me is, he says that a Litvak came up to him and says, I want to tell you a joke. Okay, what's the joke? The joke is that there are a few Yidden that come to their tzaddik, their Rebbe, their Rosh Yeshiva. You have a Breslover, comes to his Rebbe and he says, Rebbe, if I'm going to go to Gehenna, how am I going to get out? So his Rebbe tells him, and I believe this is even true, that if you have long payas, this might sound funny, but try to understand it. I'm going to grab you out of Gehenna and buy your payas. Now you can say, ouch, but really what it means is the schutz, I guess, of long payas is going to get you out of Gehenna. Litvak comes to his Rosh Yeshiva, and he says, Rosh Yeshiva, what's going to happen if I'm going to go to Gehenna? So his Rosh Yeshiva says, then you'll know everything I told you is true. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So his Rosh Yeshiva says, no, be mechadish something in Torah, and with that chiddush, I'm going to come and grab you out of Gehenna. Then the Lubavitcher comes to his Rebbe, and again, I don't like bringing Rebbe into jokes. It's a Litvish joke about Lubavitchers, but it's actually a good one. He comes to Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he says, Rebbe, what's going to happen if I go to Gehenna? Rebbe takes out $1, bracha v'atzlacha, and opening up a Chabad house in Gehenna. And this is a Litvish understanding. Now, you can understand it in a few ways, but maybe that means that sometimes shluchim end up in a place like Gehenna, and they open up a Chabad house. But that's the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, if you end up in Gehenna, that means you can transform Gehenna. If you end up in jail, you can transform jail. I mean, we have an example of someone that took this to a whole nother level. Rabbi Lipsker, who's actually right now sitting Shiva for his mother. He was an example to the world of what it means. You can be in a place, as he called it, a place called jail and not be a prison. He always said that, right? I was in a place called prison. What I always found funny is the whole world, everybody that spoke about Rabbi Mordechai, it was amazing to them. And he is amazing. He's amazing to us too. But to us, it was almost like he had a manual for what do you do when you end up in jail. He opened up the Frierdiker Rebbe's memoirs, and we know exactly. You come to jail, and they tell you that they're going to threaten you. If you don't do it, you don't listen. Like, we know exactly what to do. Just so, like, to us, it's like, we were prepared for this. We're prepared. Someone once told the Frierdiker Rebbe, he said to the Frierdiker Rebbe, this is more about Gimmel Tammuz also, by the way. Gimmel Tammuz, the Frierdiker Rebbe came out of prison, as it was mentioned in the beginning. Someone said in front of the Frierdiker Rebbe, if you were in Russia and you got arrested once, that's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. That was a chay. It's an obligation to get arrested at least once. That does not apply in New York City 2026. Okay. But in Russia, if you didn't get arrested, you most probably weren't doing anything. So it's a mitzvah. You have to get arrested. It says if you get arrested twice, that's hiddur mitzvah. Now you're already getting better. It says if you get arrested 3 times, that's already gaiva. The Rebbe, we know, got arrested on Purim, right? In Paris. Paris or Germany? Germany. And Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik got the Rebbe out, bailed the Rebbe out. That's what they say. And he said to the Rebbe, you're going to be a Rebbe because you got arrested. So our Rebbe teaches us, he's the Rosh. He's the Rosh. Listen to the same Rebbe. On the one hand, the Rebbe is sensitive to the fact that he shouldn't be sitting in one group so no one should look at them. At the same time, the Rebbe tells them, my feeling for you is not going to be that it's a rachmanis on you and just sit and cry a whole day. Because I care for you so much, because I love you so much, I can't see you as an incapable, crippled person. You're not that. You can conquer jail. That's the way I see you. But again, if you don't start off with the sensitivity, all I hear is, oh, you could do. You're just looking for excuses. No. Until you understand someone, don't tell them what to do. Don't tell them what to do. But they knew that Rebbe cared for them. They knew that. And they said that when they came out, they said they never, ever had anybody talk to them like that. Either, like I said before, people, when they heard that they're in prison, ran away from them. Or, option number 2, they said, oh, I feel so bad for you. The Rebbe, on the one hand, feels the pain, but on the other hand says, you're a powerhouse. Another story about Shalom Bar Lipsker happens to be about him personally. It's quite funny and amazing. At some point, he became very, very sick. And he was rushed to the hospital. And they had to do a test on him. Bottom line is, he falls asleep. And his wife tries calling the hospital to talk to him. In the morning, there's a phone by his bed. She tried calling it. And the phone's ringing and ringing and ringing, and he's not answering. And she's ringing. She's getting very, very scared. It's not stopping. I mean, he's not waking up. Finally, the guy in the next room, curtain over, picks up the phone and says, yeah, like, could you stop calling? She says, I'm trying to get through to my husband. So he says, I'm trying to wake up your husband also. He's not waking up. So she gets all scared, hangs up the phone, runs over to the hospital. She comes and she sees he's in a coma. He's not conscious. She gets all scared. She runs to the nurse's station and she calls up the Rebbe's office. Rabbi Klein, I believe it was, answers the phone. Says, okay, how do I call back the number? This is the number to call back. Hangs up. Call comes back. It's Rabbi Chadikov on the phone. Hello? So she answers, yeah, hello. I need to speak to Shalom Ber. She says, he's not waking up. Can't speak to him. Rabbi Chadikov, who was a real soldier of the Rebbe, that was like an irrelevant piece of information. I need to speak to Shalom Ber. He says, get Shalom Ber on the phone. She says, he's not up, he's not conscious. I have a mission for him. Okay, no one to talk to. Rabbi Chadikov's not. He has a mission for Shalom Ber. So she goes, she somehow arranges, like a real Chassidah, real Chassid. She goes and arranges that they should connect the phone from the nurse's station to Shalom Ber's room. So the call comes in. She takes the phone. He says, "Give Shalom Ber the phone." She says, "But give Shalom Ber the phone." She puts the phone by Shalom Ber, and Shalom Ber now says the story. Says, "The next thing I know is I hear Rabbi Chadikov on the phone, and he tells me, Professor Bronover, who just passed away not long ago, Professor Bronover is on his way to Florida, and you need to take him around to meet all the professors in the university." Hang up. There was no, "Oh, you're in a coma." Oh, yeah. You can't be in a coma right now. I have a mission for you. And that's it. He says, again, only a Rebbe doesn't allow us to slumber. He doesn't allow us to fall into a coma. Another little story, and with that, I'll finish for the night. I have a brother-in-law. His name is Chaim Greisman. His mother was Nechama Greisman. She has many books, English. When she went out on Shlichus to Eretz Yisrael, her and her husband, they had not had children for a year and a half. And they were going to, so to speak, say goodbye to the Rebbe. First, they were told, "I think you're not allowed to ask anything. You are going on Shlichus now. That's it. You're getting your mission and you go." Then they said that you could ask. Anyway, she came and she wanted to ask a bracha for a child. She comes to the Rebbe and she starts crying. And the Rebbe says to her, "Was weintir? Why are you crying? You're fartach in Eretz HaKodesh. You're going to Eretz Yisrael." Whatever the Rebbe meant. Either the Rebbe meant you're going to Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land, or the Rebbe meant you're going on Shlichus. Like, why are you crying? That could sound, if you don't know the Lubavitcher Rebbe, as if the Rebbe is not sensitive. Any person that knows the Rebbe a tiny bit knows that that's not what it is. The Rebbe says, "What are you crying? You're going on Shlichus. You're going to Eretz Yisrael." Anyway, as you can guess, the bracha came. My brother-in-law was born. He was the oldest son. He was born. And she called up, Label Groner, I believe it was, called up to tell the Rebbe, the Besura Toiva, that she had a baby. So the Rebbe, and my brother-in-law told me he heard it in two versions. I guess he didn't hear it from his mother, he heard it from his uncle. He heard it in two versions. He said either the Rebbe said, "Is Farvasa geweint?" So why was she crying? Or the Rebbe said, "Das ist der Frau, was hat geweint?" Is that the woman that cried? In other words, the Rebbe didn't forget that this woman cried. That mattered to the Rebbe. That matters to the Rebbe. The Rebbe is telling her, "Go on Shlichus. I know, I feel your pain, and I feel your pain. I know exactly what you're feeling, but don't fall apart. Go, and the brachas will come." I just want to. I mentioned this idea of writing a Besura Tova. Let me just speak about that for a moment. And again, I'm guessing you heard this concept, but we're just going to speak about it one more time. As I said before, in addition to asking from the Rebbe, you can also give the Rebbe. Give the Rebbe. By the way, one thing, before I finish with this point, say another point on this point, that the Rebbe, during the court case of Hey Teves, ask people that remember, you can hear the memoirs, people remembering, the Rebbe went every single day to the oil. Every day. And just imagine what that means. That means the Rebbe is not eating at all a whole day, standing at the oil, crying. We all understand, Hey Teves, by the way, is very connected to Gimmel Tammuz, right? When the Rebbe screamed so strongly that the Rebbe is alive, and anybody that says that the Rebbe is not alive, I don't have a common language with him. Not only is the Rebbe alive, but the Rebbe gets more, I don't know if you say that, gets more, becomes more alive, more active every single year. It's 35 years, if you remember these sichas, if you remember watching them. 35 years that my father-in-law became more alive, more active. These are the Hey Teves sichas. Anyway, during that time, the Rebbe went to the oil every single day during the court case. And people saw on the Rebbe was physically suffering, the Gashmias. There was a point that the Rebbe couldn't walk. Couldn't walk. Walked very slowly. They said that it took the Rebbe 10 minutes from the back of 770 to the front of 770. You were able to see pain on the Rebbe every step that the Rebbe took. So the Rebbe went to the oil every day. There was one day, and the Rebbe would come back very late. They would daven mincha very late with the Rebbe. One day they hear that the Rebbe is davening mincha early. What happened? The Rebbe is not going to the oil today. What happened? They found out that Rabbi Mullah Azimov, shliach in France, the head shliach of France, wrote a letter to the Rebbe that we had a Farbrengen last night with the Mikorovim or Chassidim, I don't remember with who. And here are all the hachlates tevos that the people took at the Farbrengen. This is what the people took by the Farbrengen, and he writes it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe looked at it and said, if that's the case, I don't need to go to the oil today. That's amazing. The hachlates of Chassidim can do what the oil can do? Wow. The power of that. So we have to give. The Rebbe has a few letters where the Rebbe writes to people, I wish that people understood, it's the Rebbe's words, I wish that people understood that Hashem wants, these are the Rebbe's words, Hashem wants that someone and someone, meaning himself and the person writing, the Rebbe says Pliny and Pliny, so-and-so and so-and-so, need to connect. They need to connect. Listen to these words. They need to connect. But this someone is not connecting. They're never writing. Okay, let me say it without saying someone and someone so it's clear. You are never writing to me. Now, it's that important that you connect with me that Hashem, listen to this. Again, this is not the Rebbe's typical way of talking. If the Rebbe is saying this, that means there's no other way to say it. The Rebbe says, in order that you should connect, Hashem needs to do something that will make you need to write to me. Listen to that. And if people would only write to me when things are good, bad things wouldn't happen. Is that incredible? The Rebbe says, I wish Chassidim understood this. Just write to me when things are good. You won't have to write to me. Because the main reason you're writing to me is to connect with me. And it's that important to connect with me that Hashem, our dear Father in heaven, might have to bring upon us some pain because it's worth it. The pain is worth it. That way you connect to the Rebbe. So instead of connecting, God forbid, through pain, let's connect through good things. So we need to make it a habit, and myself included, to write to the Rebbe when I did something good, not when I need. The Rebbe would call it Saras Chassidim, Chassidim that are only about pain. The Rebbe would say, I wish people would come to me and tell me good things. The Rebbe thanks people. Thank you for telling me good news. So Hashem should help that we should only have good news to tell the Rebbe. And the main thing is that we should be Zoicha very, very soon. The most important thing, to reunite with the Rebbe and see the Rebbe begashmias. The Rebbe is with us 100%. But to be able to see the Rebbe's shining face, hear the Rebbe's holy voice, and take us to Yerushalayim, may that happen today, tonight.